Masechet Beisah, daf 39. We are nearing the end, and we are discussing a few different topics, a couple of Mishnayot. Where at the end of this Mishnah, which was the interesting case about a woman who's making dough on Yom Tov, and she borrows some salt and water from her neighbor, and we saw that according to Tanakama, that salt and water is a problem for her. The neighbor still retains ownership to it, and therefore that dough cannot be moved outside the techum. Overlaps both me and my neighbor, so it's limited to both. That was Tanakama. The Biuda, however, says poter b'mayim. He thinks that water is different, that the water gets absorbed into the dough, it's not there anymore, and therefore, even though I borrow the water from my neighbor, it's batel, and we don't worry about it. Okay, so according to the Biuda, mayim in melach lo. The water is absorbed, but the salt, he seems to agree with Tanakama that the salt still belongs to the neighbor, and then the salt restricts the movement of the bread. Now, that's a good implication from the Mishnah. The problem is it contradicts a Braita. This Braita says water and salt also are nullified in the dough. Both if I'm making dough or if I'm making a pot of stew or something, and I use her water and salt, also the same thing, it would be batel. So here's the question, but regarding water we understand, but salt is a contradiction. Therefore we answer la kashya ha b'melach sedomit, ha b'melach isterokanit. There's different kinds of salt. Salt that comes from Sedom is coarse, maybe what we would call kosher salt. It's amazing how, like, the whole America calls kosher salt, as if there's some unkosher salt or something. So if it's thick and coarse like that, then you still see it, it's noticeable, and that's why it's not batel. But this other type of salt, maybe it comes from this Greek town, a Greek name for a border town in Israel called Ostrakine. So maybe the salt comes from there, and that's fine. And therefore, that's the one that does get absorbed. The melach sedumit, of course, is famous because that's also the reason why we do maim acharonim, because of that coarse salt that may still be in our fingers when they usually ate with their hands and could be dangerous if you touch your eye. So it comes up again here. All right, so there's different kinds of salt, and depends which one. And now one more contradictory baraita. Mayim umelach betelin be'isa ve'en betelin b'kedera mipnei rutba. In this previous baraita, we made no distinction between dough and a stew. Sounds like it's all the same, and water would be batel in both. But in this baraita, it says that water will be batel in dough, but will not be batel if it's a stew, because it's wet, it's liquidy, so the water is still there. It doesn't get absorbed into the flour, and therefore the Biuda would agree that if it was a stew, then you could not move the pot outside the techum of my neighbor who gave me the water. And this is another contradiction. We answer lo kashya, la kashya, ha be'ava, ha be'rakat. Depends. If it's a thick dish and there's no liquid sauce, it mostly gets absorbed, then it's considered that it is nullified, and that would be this, the first one. And if it's very liquidy, then that's what this baraita is talking about. So we can resolve those two, all those baraitot as well. All right, now we get to a fun case of a flame. Does a flame have any mass, any consistency? And we're going to see it across the board for different halachot. A coal, if I have a coal, then, and it was mine before when Yom Tov started, then it can only be moved in my techum. If I give you the coal, then you can't move it outside of my techum. Well, that makes sense because it's just a piece of wood that is burning. But shalhevet, the flame itself, can be taken anywhere. So if I have a candle and I don't give you the candle, but rather I transfer fire to your candle, so now that fire technically is mine. Do you say that you can't take that fire outside? No, we don't say that. Fire has no mass, has no substance, and so therefore the fire is transferable. Now it's your fire, and you can take it anywhere in your techum. Okay, good. I mean, this is really a good question. Once there was a science, the World Science Festival, huge event, and they asked scientists all around the world to explain what a flame is in scientific terms that a kid could understand. And so this is really, actually is a good scientific question. What exactly is a flame? Anyway, so now for other halachot, a coal, if a coal is donated, sanctified to the Bet HaMikdash, then no one's allowed to use it. If I use it for my personal purposes, then I would be violating me'ilah. However, the flame itself, even though I should not benefit from it because it is for the Bet HaMikdash, it's not appropriate. Nevertheless, there's no me'ilah. So we're going to see the Gemara will say it's just a banan to stay away from it. But since there's no substance, you can't say I violated anything. I didn't take anything by enjoying the flame. And third, if I carry a piece of burning wood, a coal, to the Reshut Rabim chayav. Well, why? Yeah, of course, because it's a piece of wood. But if I carry just a flame, now we're going to ask, how can you carry just a flame? Doesn't it need some substance? It needs some fuel. The Gemara will explain, it's talking about a case, let's say there's a flame inside, and I fan it so that then the flame goes out the window. All right, and nevertheless, that'll be patur because it has no mass. And so I'm not actually transferring anything in the public domain. All right, now Tanur Banan, the Mishnah listed 5 items of applications. Now we're going to have 3 applications. Now we're going to have 5 applications. Some of them are the same. We already said this, that the coal follows where the designation of the owner of the coal, but flame can be taken anywhere. And the coal, if you take it from the Bet HaMikdash, you violate. But if flame is, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't take it, but it's not me'ilah. Gachelet shel avodah zara asura v'shel hevet muteret. If I have gachelet that was someone used for idolatry, so then I'm not allowed to use that coal for myself because anything for idolatry is asur behana'ah. But if it's just a flame, someone used the flame for an idolatrous sacrifice, and then I go and take of some of that flame with my candle. That's fine, right? The flame has no substance. You can't prohibit the flame. If I carry a coal in the public domain, it would be chayav. If it's just a flame, then it's okay. As we said, we're going to be talking about a few cases of vows, and someone who says, I vow to have no benefit from you. We get into a fight, right? And I make this vow. So then I cannot take any coals from you, but I can still borrow a light, right? I can still light my cigarette from yours. I can still borrow a flame. That's not considered anything that is of substance. Okay, my shena. Shall have it avodah de sharia. Now the question is, what's the difference between idolatry, where you said it's permitted, you said permitted lechatechila, whereas hekdesh you said, listen, lechatechila, don't do it. There's no me'ilah, but you should still try not to do it. What's the difference between the two? Sounds like you should treat them equally. And the answer is avodah zara de mi'isa bedila ina shemina lo gazru barabanan hekdesh. Avodah Zarah is disgusting to Jews, right? If you see someone making an idolatrous sacrifice, you can be like, oh, that's a terrible thing. I'm going to stay away. I'm not going to go and light my cigarette from his flame, right? He's burning this pig on. I'm going to stay away from it. However, hekdesh, something consecrated to Bet HaMikdash, that's not disgusting. That's like, oh, how amazing. And so therefore a person may come to mistreat it. And so that's why the rabbis made a gezerah. Listen, don't use that flame, lechatechila. Now, if you did, there's no punishment because it's not a problem midoraita, but nevertheless, we should treat it with respect. So that makes sense. That's very interesting logic also, right? Like idolatry, even though it's terrible, you don't have to make a gezerah for it because we naturally will stay away from it. V'shalhevet patur. So now regarding carrying a coal is a problem. Carrying a flame is no problem. Hold on, we have another braita that says if you carry a flame, even a small, tiny flame, not just a big torch, chayav, you're chayav for carrying a flame. This contradicts. Oh no, the braita is talking about when I carry it with on a wooden chip. And so that's why I'm chayav, because I'm carrying the wooden chip, not for the flame itself, but rather for the fuel. So betepuk lemishum kesam. Hold on. Well, then the problem would be carrying the chip, not the flame. Why would you say there's a problem with the flame? No, we're talking about where there's it's too little. The piece of wood is so small that it wouldn't be chayav. We saw the Mishnah back in Shabbat that said you only are chayav if you carry wood. That's enough to make a flame that would cook an egg in a simple way of cooking, the minimum amount of cooking. Okay, so equivalent answer. Abaye Amar kegon de shayfe mana mishva ve'atle be nura. Here's another way where you can carry a flame. What about what is it? What are you carrying it with? You can take a vessel and put oil on it and then light it on fire and then carry it. So that's what it's talking about when it says chayav. Wait, so aren't you then carrying the vessel itself? No, bechaspa, just a shard. But then you'll be carrying the shard. And so isn't that the problem? Also, it's a small shard. Shard also has a minimum size. The minimum size to be chayav is if they would use pottery shards if they are building something and there's a little too much space between one piece and the other, so you put some pottery shards in between to shore it up. If it's big enough to be used for that, then you can carry it. Smaller than that would be okay. Okay, so in that first baraita and our Mishnah that says that you carrying a flame is okay. How could you ever carry a flame without anything that's holding it, any fuel? So about a case where it was inside and you fanned it and then it caused it to go outside, or if you're in the public domain and there's a torch there and then you fan it and that caused it to maybe it's a big torch and it goes 4 amot. So in that case, I'm moving the flame, and then that's the case the Mishnah was talking about. It says patur because the flame has no mass. And the last Mishnah for the staff is talking about water. Bor cisterns shel yachid kedagleh hayachid. If I own a cistern, I have it in my backyard, fills up with water, and now that's my water. I draw water on Yom Tov. And then I take it I can take it anywhere I want. It goes according to my tichum. If I made a tichum 2,000 amot to the east, I can take it 4,000 amot to the east, and you can't. You can only take it where I can. However, if it's a public cistern for the city, then we consider it like a partnership. And in the case of a partnership, it would be joint. So in that case, it would follow the tuchum of the city. So you could carry it around the city and 2,000 amot around, which means that if I made my tuchum all the way to the east, then I would not be able to take the public water all the way to the east with me. I would only be able to take it 2,000 amot where everyone else can move. However, there's another type of public that is different, and that is on the road from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. When people would come up, they dug cisterns on the way for the travelers. And these cisterns are not a partnership like a city is, but rather are publicly available to anyone who wants. Hefker. Right, so the Gemara is going to talk about this distinction, and this actually is an interesting distinction. What do you consider public parks today or streets? Right, are they in partnership, owned in partnership, or are they, or nobody owns them? And it'll make a difference in the effect. And so with the Ole Bavel, where has no status, until someone goes and draws water. When you draw water, it goes according to your tichum, right? Then it creates the tichum right then and there, which is really interesting. Even though we saw yesterday an opinion that said something that's hefked acquires its own reshut, but this disagrees with that opinion from yesterday. You have a question?
It's like state versus federal. It's like a tribe would have their own, like the city, and then the federal would be like the highways. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, right. I imagine that these are very complicated laws, and maybe there's like a gated community might be different. A shared driveway is different from a common area that have a lot of houses, and there's a street that can only access those houses. So so this could be, you can see this could be relevant. We're going to see in a few minutes an idea of a corporation in the Talmud too. Okay, so let's see how this works. Tenan, bor shel yachid keregleh yachid. Urmin hu neharot hamoshchin ma'ayanot hanob'in harehen keregleh kol adam. So Rava asked the following question to Rav Nachman. On the one hand, we have this Mishnah that says a private cistern follows that owner of the cistern. He can take the water anywhere he wants. But we have another Braita that seems to contradict, because here it says that rivers and springs, let's assume that they're also private on private land, and springs, they are like anyone who takes it can go anywhere they want. So what's the difference? How come a cistern is different from a spring? Amar Rava hacha b'maiskinan b'mchunasin v'temanami amar Rabbi Chiya bar Avin amar Shemuel b'mchunasin. And Mishnah is talking about water that's collected. That's why it's in a cistern. It's not moving. So there's a difference between moving water and non-moving. If it's collected in a cistern, so it has a place, and this is mine, it's on my land, so then it's only in one place. Whereas if it's flowing, or even a spring that's still, it's not flowing down to a different place, but it's still flowing, then it doesn't acquire any one space, and therefore anyone who takes it can move it according to that person who takes it. Okay, now, Beshel ole Bavel keragleh hamemale. Okay, the rest of that is going to be a long discussion about this case, so let's pay attention here. It was said, this is by Amoraim, have the following question. The Mishnah said that if there's this public cistern on the road to Bavel, anyone who takes it can then take that water according to their tichum. This is the tichum of the drawer. But what if it's a case where Reuven draws water, not for himself, but for his friend Levi. Levi is weak and tired, he can't draw himself. So Reuven says, I will draw it for you. And with the hope is that when he draws it for Levi, then Levi can go and take it wherever he goes, according to his tichum. Will that work? Rav Nachman Amar keragleh mi shenitmaleu lo. Rav Nachman says, yes, it works. It goes according to the one for whom it was filled, in other words, Levi. Even though Reuven drew it, since he had in mind this will be Levi's water, Levi can carry it. And if Levi made a tichum, made an eruv all the way out there, he can carry it everywhere he goes. Rav Sheshet says, no, it doesn't work. It only goes by the feet of the one who fills it. Reuven drew it. And then it's his, and it's limited to his tichum. Okay, interesting machloket. We're going to see two explanations for the machloket. One was going to be a very long discussion that we're going to reject, and at the end we're going to see a short explanation. Okay, so here's the long one. Mor savar bera dehefkerahu, mor savar bera deshutafehu. What is this cistern? That's on the way. What do we consider it? So Rav Sheshet, the second opinion, would say it's hefker. Hefker is ownerless property. Now, there's a law regarding ownerless property that you can find in Baba Metzia, which says that, let's say there's a watch in the street. I'm allowed to take the watch for myself, right? It's ownerless, it's no signs on it, I'm allowed. But I cannot take it for my friend. Why not? Even though we have a law, Zachin le'adam shelo befanav, I can benefit someone even if they're not around and say, oh, I'm sure he would like this watch and take it for them. But that's only if it will not detract from anybody else. And this watch in the middle of the street, since anyone can take it, when I pick it up for someone else, I am taking away the possibility of anybody else getting it. So therefore, you cannot acquire hefker on behalf of somebody else in general. I can acquire it for myself. And so since this bod is considered hefker, therefore when the Reuven takes it, he takes it for himself, and it does not transfer to Levi, and that's why Levi cannot take it anywhere he wants. That explains Rav Sheshet, the second opinion. Rav Nachman says, no, we consider this board out on the road to be partners. All the Jewish people, anyone who ever wants to pass on that road and come to Israel is a partner in it. Since it's a partnership, so Reuven has ownership, and since he has ownership, he can acquire some on behalf of Levi, who also has ownership. And then that's a different mechanism. It has a different law. Okay, so it's very interesting the way a technicality can actually be a hint to a foundational, different concept of ownership. Now that's Rav Nachman. We're gonna challenge Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman Hareni from the following long case. This is the Mishnah in Nedarim. If someone says, I am prohibited to you, right? We're not friends anymore, and I don't want you to benefit from anything that I have. So he says, anything I have is like a cherem, is prohibited to, is like it's consecrated, only regards to you. So then, and therefore, I can do that, and I restrict your ability. You can't come over, you can't have, take my coffee or anything. And the other way around is also possible. If I say, I am no longer going to benefit from you, then I cannot come over, I cannot eat a meal at your house, I can't get a lift if you offer me one. And you can do both together. If you're really upset at the person, right, you say, you cannot benefit from me, and I cannot benefit from you. We both then cannot benefit from each other. Okay, so that makes sense for things that are like in my house and in your house. What about things that are owned in partnership? For example, things in the city like a bathhouse or a bet knesset, right, is shared ownership. So according to this, we're going to see in a second, neither of us can go to Bet Knesset because you can't benefit from my share of the Bet Knesset or the bathhouse, and I can't benefit from your partnership in it. So that's really interesting. But here we have a distinction between something that's hefker, has no ownership, and something that is in partnership. So you see here the cistern, anything that ole bavel can use, that's considered hefker. Nobody owns it, and therefore it's okay. We can, even though you can't use anything that's mine. I don't own the cisterns on the road, and so therefore you can benefit from it. But anything that's in the city, anything else that's in the city, which is considered a partnership, since I own part of it, you can't use it. And here's a list of those various items. The Temple Mount and all the chambers and courtyards of the Bet HaMikdash. This is not owned in partnership by the Jewish people, but rather this is open to all. It's not shared, but rather public. And therefore, I don't own any piece of the Temple Mount, neither do you, so we can both go up there because we're not benefiting from each other. But the streets of the city and the synagogue and the bathhouse, those, everybody contributes, and so it's a shared partnership. And since I own a share, you cannot benefit from me. That's the Mishnah. Now let's apply it to our case and see what the question that Abba is asking Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, you said above that a bod, the cistern that's on the road, is considered a partnership. And since it's a partnership, that's why Reuven can draw on behalf of Levi, and that works. That was your explanation of the mechanism. But amay mutad, but why is that allowed? We already have enough material for the question. Right up here in this Mishnah, it says that the bod is considered hefked, anyone, even if we can't benefit from each other, we are allowed to use that cistern. So you see, it's considered hefked and not a partnership. And just to add one more source, in case that wasn't enough, a Mishnah in the Darim says, "Shutafin shenadru hana'ah ze mizeh asurim likanes lachased." If we are partners, and we say we can't benefit from each other, then we both cannot enter that courtyard that we have in partnership. So that just emphasizes what we said before. So that's the question to Rav Nachman. How can you say that the cistern is partnership? Because that would mean it wouldn't be allowed for people who vowed against each other. And whereas this Mishnah here, the first Mishnah in the Darim, says that it is permitted to use the cisterns on the roads, which sounds like it is a public hefked and not ownership. That's the question, and the answer is lidchos babod hachinameh. You can erase the second lidchos. Okay, this Mishnah here, the last Mishnah that you mentioned, that is talking about washing in the cistern. Okay, that washing in the cistern is a little gross because also gonna drink from it, but that's probably the least gross thing about the cistern. Let's say a swimming pool, right? And so if we have a shared swimming pool and we get into a fight and say, hey, you can't benefit from anything of mine, and or the other way around, then you can't swim in the pool because you're swimming around and you're touching all the water, and therefore, right, you're using my pool, so you're not allowed. But this Baraita here, the Mishnah, the first Mishnah, is talking about to fill up your jug with water. And even if you say it's a partnership, and we vowed against benefiting from each other, nevertheless it's still allowed, because when you're filling it up with water, it's splittable. We're splitting. This is my water and that's your water. Now, even though it's all mixed up and there's no division in there, nevertheless, we're gonna use Be'era in a second. Retroactive designation. Whatever water that I fill up will have retroactively been mine and the other yours. So since we can split it, therefore I'm not benefiting from you. I'm benefiting from my own water. Whereas swimming, you can't really say that. Okay, very interesting. And so Rav Nachman's answer would be based on the idea of Be'era, which we'll see in a second. And just to go back, right? How does this help us? Rav Nachman's the one that said that in this board on the road, Reuven can draw something on behalf of Levi. He can do that because it's a partnership, and it's okay to say it's a partnership, even though this Mishnah said that partners. Even when you said you vowed against each other, you're still allowed to use it. It's not because it's hefked. It's because even partners can draw water and say, yeah, we're separating and going our own ways, and that's fine. Okay, good. So now we have an answer. The problem is that this answer depends on Be'era. So does Nachman in general say that you can do retroactive designation, and you would need that in this case because you have to say, oh, this water that I got retroactively was mine from the time of the vow? Does he say that? He doesn't. And this is going to be another long Mishnah Shekalim, if you remember it from when we learned about Tanan, Hachin HaShutafin. You have two brothers and they are partners. Had they become partners, it doesn't matter, but a likely case is that their father died and they got an inheritance and they split the inheritance. And now they're partners like any business partners. So we have two laws that apply to partners. The second one is that any animals that were born within a year, you have to give maaser. That's only true if it's owned singly. A partnership does not have to give maaser. That's a law that we derive somewhere else. So since the two brothers own it in partnership, they don't have to give maaser. And the other thing is kalbon. Kalbon is a surcharge for machasita shekel. When you went to the Bet HaMikdash and gave machasita shekel, because people brought different denominations and they had to change it, so there's a surcharge. It's like, when you pay a donation to the Bet Knesset with a credit card. So who should pay the surcharge? Sometimes I ask, right? Can we add the surcharge so that the synagogue doesn't have to pay it? So the Bet HaMikdash, they didn't want to pay the surcharge. You have to give a machasita shekel. We don't want to have to pay the money changers for all that. And since you usually you bring a shekel or something else, So therefore, you have to pay this kalbon, which is a small amount that is a surcharge. Now, everyone has to pay the kalbon, almost everyone. Even if two partners come and give a full shekel, and in that case, they don't need any change, right? We're giving you a whole shekel. Nevertheless, we say they have to pay the kalbon also. The only case who doesn't have to pay a kalbon is a father who is giving on behalf of his children, because then they're all one, right? I'm giving it as one single unit, which is more together than partners. So these partners, they have to give a kalbon. Now the second case is when the father is alive, when the father is alive, or after he died, before the sons split it. Okay, so this is very interesting. The sons didn't split it yet, so it's in the state that's in the name of the father, even though the father is not around and the sons are controlling it. So this is actually an idea of a corporation, right? It's a corporate entity. It's a single entity to the extent that for maaser behema, chayavin, you have to give maaser because it's owned by one entity, not by two people. And you don't have to bring a kalbon, just like when the father contributes for two dependents, he does not have to have a kalbon. The estate is giving on behalf of its not partners, its shareholders, its trustees, and therefore it's like the father was alive. So this is very important for halacha for modern times. All modern business revolves around corporations, and halacha is difficult to apply to that because a corporate entity, what is that in halacha, right? If I lend you money and then I go bankrupt, my business goes bankrupt and it lent you money, so do I have to pay back? The corporation has to pay you back, but the corporation is bankrupt, even if I still have $1 million right in the bank. So is that halachically, do we accept the idea of a corporation or do I have to pay anyway? This is a huge, very difficult question, but this is a precedent for the idea of a corporation in halacha, so this would be a good place to look to answer that. Okay, anyway, back to our subject. Now we have this Mishnah that has these two cases. How does it apply to, we're going to prove from here that Nachman does not have retroactive designation. Where are we going to see that? Well, we're going to see two opinions, Rav Anan and then Rav Nachman. And you'll see from the contrast between them. Ve'amar Rav Anan, Naz Amora commenting on this Mishnah, and Shekalim, Lo shanu ela shechalku gedayim keneged telaim utelaim keneged gedayim. Wait, by the way, tangent, there is no Talmud Bavli to Shekalim. Right, there's only Talmud Yerushalmi. So remember when we learned it was Yerushalmi. Although here, this is Talmud Bavli, and it's a commentary of Amoraim on the Mishnah and Shekalim. So they did study Masechet Shekalim, right? But apparently there wasn't such a set part of the curriculum that they had a full commentary on it. Okay. Amar Rav Anan, Lo shanu ela shechalku gedayim keneged telaim utelaim keneged gedayim. This first case, when you consider them to be separate partners, and therefore they don't have to give maaser and they do give kalbon, right? When are they considered partners that's separated and not a corporate entity anymore? That's only when they split it up and said, listen, I'm going to take the goats and you take the lambs, right? And so then in that case, how do you do that? You have to go and evaluate how much of the goats, how much of the lambs, and you do a whole calculation, and that's a commercial transaction. So you know what? We took this one estate and we split it totally. So that now it's a regular partnership with all the laws of partnership. But that would not apply if we split everything, divide everything equally, right? And I'll get half the lambs and you get half the lambs. I get half the goats and you get half the goats. Then we just, we divide it up however we divide it up. And in that case, we can say that this division could very well be the original division that the father had in mind at the time of that he deceased. Now, even though the father wasn't, didn't say there's goat A, B, and C, nevertheless, we can use a retroactive designation to say that it was kind of up in the air and a superposition. It could be your goat, my goat, right? And now it gets split. So therefore, if we split everything down the middle, every type, then it remains as one single unit, a corporate entity, even though these are mine and these are yours, right? Because it never goes through that commercial transaction process. That's very interesting. Rav Nachman disagrees. Rav Nachman amar afilu chalku gedim keneged gedayim, utan keneged telaim, and omer zechel komagim sharishon lekach. Now, even if we split the lambs equally and the goats equally, you cannot say this retroactively was mine beforehand. Why? So you see here that he does not hold that there is such a thing as retroactive designation. If we keep it in a corporation, that's fine. But once we split it, no matter how you split it, there's no way to say this was original. And so Rav Nachman does not have berera. Okay, this is a problem. If he does not have the concept of berera altogether, then the case of that Mishnah, when we vow against each other, and it says that we can't use the water, that you can use the water in the cistern and on the road. Well, that can't be because it's a partnership. Because if it's a partnership, then how would it be allowed to split it? You can't tell me retroactive designation because he doesn't have retroactive designation, and therefore that case of the cistern on the way must have been hefker. That's the only way that you can explain that even though we can't benefit from each other, it would be allowed. Since that case is hefker, now we go back to the question of Nachman. You said that in that cistern we're all going to on Aliyah. And Reuven draws for Levi, and that's okay. It can be Levi's. How could it be Levi? After all, it's hefked, and generally hefked, you can't take from one person on behalf of another. And finally, we get to our final answer, which is short. You're right. Forget all this that we just said. A cistern in the middle of the road on the way to Israel is in fact hefked. All Jews, anyone can come and take this. We're talking about a difference of how to apply the law when I pick it up on behalf of my neighbor. One says that it works. Okay, there's different ways. The Rishonim, some say, Rashi says the other way. I'm going to do this way. Morsavad is Rav Nachman says kana. It works. Reuven can pick it up on behalf of acquire it on behalf of his friend. Why? Even though it's hefked. But a watch is different from water. Remember, what did we say about the watch? I'm not allowed to pick up this watch for Levi because then I'm taking it away from Shimon, who may have passed by and wanted it. And so I can't do that. However, water is not the same. There's plenty of water. If I draw, right, I'm not drawing the last gallon from the cistern. If I draw a gallon of water from the cistern for Levi, he's happy, and then Shimon can come 2 minutes later and draw water also, right? There's not infinite amount, but there's plenty of water, so I'm not taking it away from anybody else. Therefore, Rav Nachman says it's permitted. Whereas Rav Sheshet says lo kana. No, it has the same law. The water and the watch has the same law, and there's no way, unless we're partners, if it's just hefked, there's no way that Reuven can acquire it for Levi, because it's still taking away something from everybody else, and therefore it is not allowed. All right, so we saw how this somewhat technical case brings up so many fundamental concepts that can actually be applicable to halakha today as well in modern corporations. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen v'amen.